Hey everyone! So in this video I'm going to go over the PowerPoint on Chapter 9, writing about point of view. It's a very short PowerPoint, but it's very important information because point of view in a story is super important. Point of view refers to who is telling the story. Who is the narrator? Is it a character? Is it the main character? A secondary character? Is it some all-knowing, all-seeing persona that is somehow, aware of everything and is sharing everything with us? It's important to understand the different types of point of view that an author can use, and then also how that might affect the story and our understanding of the story. So on slide 3, we know that the story is told by a narrator, and we know that that narrator shares information with us. Understanding what the point of view is can help us figure out if what we've been told is true. It can also help us figure out the underlying theme of a story, right? There are several different types of point of view. The first is one that we are probably super familiar with, the omniscient narrator, omniscient point of view. So that is the all-knowing narrator, the one who knows all and sees all. They are not a character in the story. It is just some random, disembodied voice that's sharing everything with us. They are able to not only tell us the action of the story, but they are also able to tell us what each character is thinking and feeling. There's also limited omniscient. So it's very similar to just a traditional omniscient narrator, but this time they only have access to one character's thoughts and feelings, typically the main character. But somehow they still know everything about that character and everything about the action in the story. You can have a first-person narrator. The first-person narrator is a part of the story. They are telling us about events in which he or she has been involved as a major participant. This is often when they're using the personal pronoun I, right? They are speaking directly to us. One interesting thing to think about when you are dealing with a first-person narrator is we only get their side of the story. And maybe you're thinking, well, isn't their side of the story all that matters? Isn't that what we're supposed to be focusing on anyway? To a certain extent, yes, but it's still through their eyes, through their biases, through their judgments, through their lenses, and they may not be giving us the most accurate account of the events. You can also have a second-person narrator. It's not on the list here because it's very closely connected to a first person. But a second-person narrator would be still someone who is there to witness the events, a part of the story, but not a main character. That type of narrator is also questionable. And I can give you a couple of examples here in terms of how you might come to distrust the first person or second person narrator. One author in particular that always comes to my mind when I think of what we call unreliable narrator is Edgar Allan Poe. And he has two, almost all of his stories involve an unreliable narrator. But my two favorites are The Cask of Amontillado and The Telltale Heart. And the one that most people are probably more familiar with is The Telltale Heart. So in that story, we have a first-person narrator. We never learn their name. We really don't even learn if it's a man or a woman. I think most people assume it's a man, but there's actually nothing that says for sure. But this narrator shares this story with us, where he had been living with an old man who had what the narrator called a blue vulture-like eye, a vulture eye. And it was something about this man's eye that just bugged the narrator, like almost to the point of paranoia. And he came up with a plan to destroy the eye, which of course would also then destroy the man. And he goes about this very methodical thing, and then a moment of opportunity presents itself, and he smothers the old man and dismembers his body and hides the body pieces under the floorboards in his house, in his apartment. And the neighbors had heard a scream in the middle of the night, so they had called the cops, and the police come to the apartment, and the narrator is convinced that he or she has gone about all of this very thoughtfully, very methodically, which proves he's not crazy, or she's not crazy. That's what the narrator spends a good portion of the story trying to do, is convince us that they are perfectly sane, because it was so planned out, because he's so methodical about it, blah, blah, blah. And then, so he had, the narrator has no problem allowing the police to come in and question him, and, he very calmly and confidently answers their questions. But as more time passes, he starts to hear a ringing in his ear, and then he starts to hear a thumping, and he's convinced that it is the old man's heart underneath the floorboards. And this goes on, and he is convinced then that the police also hear it and know that he's guilty, so he can't handle it anymore, and he digs up the floorboard and exposes the body. And if you're taking him for his word, because he's trying to convince us that he's not insane. He's trying to convince us that there was good reason for what he did. And, if you're not really paying careful attention, you might believe him. You might sympathize with him. Or empathize. I hope none of us have actually experienced that. But you might empathize with him. But if you think a little deeper about the point of view from which the story is told, then you have to question everything, because the narrator clearly is insane. And if that's the case, what if any of the story is real? Can we trust the narrator's account of the events? So when you're dealing with a narrator, a point of view, and that narrator is a character within the story, you have to question what they tell us, what they reveal to us, and perhaps what they keep hidden from us. We also have the objective narrator. And the objective narrator is omniscient-like, in that they are all-knowing of the action and dialogue, but they do not know what any of the characters are thinking or feeling. So it's almost like watching a movie of it, because unless a character in a movie expresses their thoughts and feelings, we as viewers don't know. We can only guess. So in a story, if we have an objective narrator, it is a narrator who is not a character in the story at all, who is aware and knows everything, all of the action and all of the dialogue, but does not know anything about what's going on inside each character. That's an interesting narrator to deal with because we have no access to the internal workings of each character. And that causes us to have to pay very close attention to the action and the dialogue to try to figure it out. So these are our different types of points of view. And point of view is not always going to be a significant factor in figuring out the theme of a story, but it often is. So think about whose point of view we're getting when we read each of our 6 stories. And then we will discuss the point of view in each one after we've read them. Alright, if you have any questions about Chapter 9 at all, let me know. Otherwise, you are free to go ahead and move on to the next lesson.